That's my easy child. You've always been so independent. I've never had to worry about you. My child is so mature. Sometimes I feel like she is taking care of me. You cannot have a B. You are capable of straight A's. You're just lazy. Stop crying or I'll give you an actual reason to cry. Stop being so childish. Stop whining, you're embarrassing me. In this video, we're gonna talk about the costs of childhood trauma. So not only that your childhood was stolen from you and you never had the experience of a joyful, safe childhood, but now as an adult, you also have to deal with the consequences of this. And more importantly, you have to find ways to heal from it. Otherwise, whatever happened at your early age will keep reoccurring in the form of triggers and responses to those triggers that will feel inadequate in the present moment, but nevertheless will hurt you. I'm going to talk a little bit about a study that started the conversation of childhood trauma and its effects on adulthood. And then I'm going to talk about the experience of childhood trauma for the person. And finally, we're going to talk about how childhood trauma actually affects your personality, how your early experiences built you into the person you are today. Because if you recognize that certain parts of your personality are due to this experience, in case you don't really like it, maybe from there on you can easier find a way to change that. In 1997, Vincent Felitti and Robert Ander conducted a breakthrough study that started the conversation on how childhood trauma later on affects adulthood. This is the AC study, Adverse Childhood Experiences. The study looked at the correlation between childhood trauma and later life health and well-being. The study measures childhood experiences that occurred before the age of 18, and it's made of 10 categories such as physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, neglect, household dysfunction like substance abuse or domestic violence, or having a family member with mental illness or who is incarcerated. If you score 6 or more on this study, you have 1200% increased risk of killing yourself. Felitti and Anders' research involved surveys of over 17,000 participants and found that ACs are surprisingly common, with more than half of participants reporting at least one such experience and 1 in 5 reporting 3 or more. The study revealed a strong link between the number of such experiences and the negative health outcomes later in life, including chronic physical conditions like heart disease, diabetes, and obesity, as well as mental health issues like depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. Earlier I said that scoring 6 or more on the survey significantly increases your risk of suicide, but even having just one of those adverse childhood experiences already increases your risk of suicide as compared to those who don't have any of them. In fact, scoring just 4 points on this survey already increases the risk of suicide by 30%. I'm going to leave the link to that study in the description box, but let's not talk about how it actually feels to experience childhood trauma. Trauma, in a very simple language, is when something happens, you get overwhelmed, and you lose your ability to reason. Instead, you react in a very emotional and often inadequate way to the current situation because traumatic experience isn't based on the situation in front of you. It's based on your memory. So when a child feels that his or her parents don't really love them, do not take proper care of them, then this might create a deep conflict in that person that could sound something like, well, if those people didn't want me, why did they bring me here? And oftentimes people with childhood trauma also say, well, I didn't choose to be born, so I'm gonna do whatever I want and I'm not gonna try to even be happy because guess what? I didn't choose to be here, so I'm not capable of being happy. I'm not obliged to be happy. I'm in pain. I'm gonna stay in pain and I'm gonna do whatever it takes to maybe feel better from time to time, but that's about it. So for many people with such experiences, there is a very little expectation for happiness. What else is a typical consequence of childhood trauma? Well, when screaming and slamming doors has been the familiar normal noise to you when growing up, then in adulthood, when you have relationships or even friendships or even co-workers, when those people around you get silent, you will interpret this as them being upset with you. And once you have this perception, you will anticipate a fight. You're gonna get anxious and you may even already become defensive in whatever they say first. After the period of silence, you will read into it as an attack or maybe as the prelude to the conflict that you're anticipating. Another unfortunate consequence is that your body remembers. You may not consciously remember it, but you somehow remember being pushed away, being neglected, being left alone crying, being left hungry, being left thirsty, being left in pain, being left sick, and sometimes even being blamed for being sick because you failed to protect yourself, because you should have known better. You should have been born with the knowledge how to do everything better. And every single time when you misbehaved, you failed to act accordingly, because how dare you not know better? So yeah, the body remembers, and all this physical and emotional pain lives inside you rent-free, and every now and then it blows up. So when something triggers you as an adult, your traumatic reaction is sort of regression to this age. In that moment of being triggered, you are a wooden child in an adult's body, and your reaction in the eyes of those around you is too sensitive, too dramatic, too irrational, because the pain that you're having is inside you. They cannot see it. So for them, you are acting inadequately to the situation. And they may even think that your exaggerated, overly sensitive behavior is a form of manipulation, because you must be crying or appearing in so much pain for no apparent reason. For a reason, you probably are trying to win their sympathy. You want them to stop being angry at you. Maybe you are even avoiding accountability for something, because this exaggerated reaction must be there for a reason, right? And that's their point of view. On the other hand, however, you first of all completely act out of trigger, and you cannot even reason in that moment. But second of all, the moment you actually calm down and you look back at your reaction, you yourself might judge yourself for the behavior, because you look back at this and be like, how could I be so emotional, so weak? And you hate yourself for behaving that way. A lot of people will blame you for behaving that way, and it's a lose-lose situation. Another sweet consequence from childhood trauma is that you take everything too seriously, which of course, you were never allowed to be a child, so you were never allowed not to be serious. And as an adult, you might be oftentimes perceived as grumpy or cold because you can't even take a joke. Overall, having a childhood trauma is like having a debt that somebody else took on your behalf. You never had the chance to see the benefits of that debt, but now it is your responsibility to pay it back. And not only that, but you pay it with interest, because you have to find a way to recover from that debt. So let's talk now about how childhood trauma can shape your personality, as I believe recognizing this relationship between, oh, I behave that way because of that reason, may help you change that way whenever you don't like it or you recognize it doesn't really serve you well. Although this is a topic in psychology for many years, and I don't believe we're anywhere closer to having a good conclusive answer to that question, we're gonna go over 5 of the most common personality traits of people with childhood trauma. You might become a perfectionist. There are 2 things here to discuss when it comes to perfectionism. First, one of your parents have probably very often said, "My child is fine." But let's say as a very fine child, you were loving your family environment so much that when you grew up, what you did first, at the very first opportunity, is to leave your country and go as far away as possible out of fineness, And then you became bilingual. And what happens then is that as an adult, you will express your emotions. You will prefer to express your emotions in that second language, not in your mother tongue, because expressing yourself in another language creates a bit of psychological distance between your emotions and you. So you're more honest in expressing your emotions without really giving them ownership. They're not exactly yours because they're set in this foreign language. You don't really internalize them so much. So it feels safer to share them. And why do you need to do this in another language? Is because as a child, you were never allowed to share your feelings to that extent because you were not supposed to feel any sadness, troublesome, weakness, whatever. Again, you're not supposed to be a child. So you having this other language as a shield that allows you to speak up your mind and heart. The second point with perfectionism is that you probably felt like your parents only loved you when you deserved it, when you performed, when you achieved something, because again, you are not allowed to fail at anything. So you want to be perfect so that you deserve love. Not only that, but you'd love to somehow reach a point where you're finally worth it of your parents' love. Because the thing is that sometimes we think, oof, if my parents wanted to have a child and they had me, but they didn't love me, I must have messed up. Like, what did I do wrong for them not to love their child? There's something wrong with me. And we try for a good amount of our lives to fix this, to become worthy of that love. So we try to be perfect in order to increase our chance of being worth it. And by the way, this trauma, this traumatic response has spillover effects. This perfectionism is not only how you deal with your parents, but it's also how you deal with your friends and partners. It's also how you deal with your hobbies, how you deal with your job. This is a mindset that you have, that unless you are top performer, you are failing. There is no middle ground. There is no gray area. It's either the top, which is perfect, or it's the ground, for which it doesn't matter why it is the ground. Whatever brought you there, not a real excuse. You should have been here. If you are to remember just one thing from this video, perfectionism never comes from safe and secure environment. You are the way you are for a reason. Yes, it's your responsibility to heal from it, but it didn't come from a good place. You're likely to be a people pleaser. Being used to stressful and unpredictable environments as a child makes you more anxious to change, to new faces, new social environments, and it is more difficult for you to navigate social interactions. Also, you probably grew up kind of being jealous of your classmates because they were looking forward to Friday because it was weekend. They were going to spend more time with their family at home where they really wanted to be. and not you. You liked Mondays because, in a way, school was your escape from the sweet home. But of course, you couldn't share this with your classmates because you didn't want to be the weird one. So you learned to mask, you learned to pretend, you learned to match their energy. So here is also a good moment to mention how closely related traumatic responses or symptoms of a childhood trauma are to ADHD, because people pleasing is a very common trait in both situations. But differentiating between ADHD and trauma is probably a topic for another video. I'm just saying that when you try to mimic the energy of those around you and satisfy them and make sure that they like you, it's not because so much you are like a narcissist who just wants to be liked by everybody. No, it's more about you trying to avoid being seen because you worry that you're so broken that if others truly see you, there's no chance they're gonna like you. You may develop an eating disorder. The researcher who actually conducted the study I showed you at the beginning of this video, the ACE study, had a previous line of research in eating disorders, and he observed in an earlier study that 55% of his participants with obesity had childhood trauma. And from there on, we have a lot of research showing that there is a link between emotional childhood trauma and eating disorders. This could be in both cases, binge eating or anorexia. For example, binge eating is a coping mechanism for stress. When you feel like the issues around you are more than you can manage, when you don't have the capacity to take care of the world around you, but you still want to feel better, you want to escape this, and you just want to give yourself high dopamine, high comfort, high moment of safety and pleasure, you eat. And you eat as much as possible and as quickly as possible. And yeah, if you're having a binge eating disorder, somebody may tell you, can't you just use your self-discipline to say no? Well, the thing is, again, you are reacting to a trauma. This something triggers you and you're having traumatic experience, which again is not based on the current situation, it's based on memory, right? So it's everything else but rational. And the thing is that when the pain is so much, the need for pleasure, for feeling better just for a few minutes is as needed as oxygen. You act childish. If you were never allowed to be a child, because basically from the moment you learn to walk, you were expected to act with some sense of maturity, like an adult. You were directly or indirectly expected to take care of those around you, to behave, to not throw tantrums, to not cry without a reason. And there was never, almost never, a good reason for you to cry. When you were never allowed to be a child, there is this need inside you that has never been satisfied, and you grow up to be an adult who feels like something has been stolen away from you, some pleasure, some happiness, something has not been given to you but others have received. And although you cannot turn the time back and be a child again, you can bring the childish behavior or the childish items in your environment. You can bring the childhood to your adulthood, and you should do that, yes. Buy the pink and purple Tupperware and the Disney wall art or mugs or Superman t-shirts or Star Wars t-shirts, whatever you wanted as a child. If you can afford it as an adult, do it. And I'm not only saying this from psychological point of view, although there's a bunch of research that could support this behavior, but I'm also saying it as an enthusiast in quantum physics. I love quantum physics. I love trying to understand the world around us. I'm not telling you go and read it because I know it's not for everybody, but trust me on this one. There is enough evidence in quantum physics to support that time is not as linear as we experience it. And in that sense, there is a good chance that if you fix something in the present moment, you're actually healing something in the past. And for that opportunity, for that little chance of this being true, it is worth it being a child now. when you can afford it. Get the childish thing. You don't know how far this may go. You believe you're self-sufficient. A lot of people with childhood trauma become adults who isolate themselves. They either believe that they're completely self-sufficient, and that's normal because, well, you were expected to take care of yourself when you were a child. You were expected to not need other people, to be independent, to be strong. And if you're here now, well, obviously we're successful, right? So it makes a lot of sense that you will become hyper-independent adult who would believe that you don't need anybody else. The other point will be that you're not used to sharing. When something really hurts you, when something really goes deep, you shut down, you isolate, you withdraw because, well, you're not used to your needs and emotions being important to those around you because, well, you didn't grow up like this, right? So you have good reasons to shut down, live alone, or even when you're in a relationship to kind of keep a lot to yourself and not open up and be vulnerable with this other person because not only you're not used to it, but you don't even know how to do it. It's not natural to you. You're feeling weird and awkward about this kind of behavior because it's new. So yeah, if one of your parents kind of likes to tell you from time to time, you are my easy child. I never had to worry too much about you. Yeah, you were the easy child because you had to worry about yourself and you learned to be your own parent. Not a good thing. It's not something that parents should be proud about, but they are. And here and now, what I wish you recognize is that just because those people didn't give you much and you in fact didn't need them and now you don't need them much because you grew up without them, those people are not all the people in the world. We are social creatures and we are better when we belong to some social group. It doesn't need to be a lot. You can be introverted. You can have 2 friends. That's totally fine. But people are important. Yes, people can break you, but also people can build you. We grow better around people who love us because through that love, we also see ourselves better, we understand ourselves better, and we grow more. So I know it feels comfortable to isolate, but it is not the best thing for you anymore. It was the best thing for you when you had no other chance, when you couldn't go and choose another family. Yes, there were moments when that coping mechanism of isolating saved you, but there is a line. After that line, the coping mechanism no longer serves you. And that line is called adulthood. This is when you have the freedom to choose your own family, to choose your own friends, to choose your own people. And then I really wish you to go out there with your trust issues, which I completely recognize as normal, valid, but you still have to give it a chance, not because of anybody telling you this so much, but because of you. You're gonna feel better. You're gonna heal your inner child and the current adult as well when you surround yourself by just a few people who actually care about your needs. It feels nice. So what now? Well, discussing what childhood trauma feels like, or the consequences and the way it shapes our personality, all of this is one side of the story. The other side of the story is how can you actually heal from that? And this is not something I can wrap up on the end of the video, but just one kind reminder here. And this is that as much as your feelings are always valid, your behavior isn't always valid. And this is not so much to blame you, and actually at all not about blaming you. It's about recognizing that certain behavior hurts you as much as it hurts those around you. And sometimes acting on those triggers, the real intensity, the emotional drainage that you feel afterwards is for you. You're paying the price for the trigger a lot more than those around you. So there is a good reason why you should pay attention to the behavior and try and change that for yourself first, and then obviously for those around you. Remember from 2 minutes ago when I said find people who care about your feelings? When you find those, they would be truly hurt when you are hurt. And a little silver lining here is that due to neuroplasticity, we are completely capable of changing our behavior. It does take time, especially when for years of our childhood we have been taught to act in a certain way. Imagine for the first 15 years, 20 years of your life, you've been acting in a certain way. And now you're seeing the triggers as a consequence of this in your 30s, for example, or 40s. How could you, just for days or weeks, change what you have been doing for years? You can't. It's gonna take time, but it is possible. This is very stubborn, but it's also capable of change. And when you are consistent and mindful about your behavior, then you can arrive on the other side. You cannot turn the time back, but you also don't have to relive the hell you grew up in. You didn't choose that hell back then, but you can choose not to be in that hell anymore. You can choose to change. So I wish you to make that decision for yourself and to walk the path until it starts to feel better, because you didn't deserve the pain back then. Now you don't deserve it either. You shouldn't settle down for it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I hope this video resonated with those who needed such a video. I didn't make this video with the idea of like reaching everybody out there, but if I reach the people who actually felt home with some of those sentences and examples, then to those of you, hey, be proud of what you survived. I know it was a lot, and I know it was painful, and I know because of it now pain feels very familiar, but you survived it for a reason. And just believe that regardless of the past, you are capable of building a better today for yourself and even more peaceful tomorrow. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.